I think, in almost every office in the world, there's always that one person everyone notices. Their ideas somehow end up on every slide. And then, there's the quiet one. The one who fixes the broken spreadsheet. Daniel was that quiet one. Being invisible was the price he had to pay for being humble. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of noise, stay with Daniel for a few minutes. And before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button to join our community of quiet achievers. Your silence was never the problem, you just never learned how to use it. Daniel was 29, a data analyst in a mid-sized tech company in Toronto. He wasn't the charismatic one. He didn't have the loudest voice or the sharpest jokes. But when a project was on fire, when a client was threatening to leave, when the numbers didn't make sense and the deadline was hours away, someone always said the same sentence. Can we loop Daniel in? He was the guy who stayed late, ordered cheap takeout, and quietly pulled the whole thing back from the edge. But when the sun came up, and everyone stood in the conference room with coffee cups in their hands, it was never Daniel who spoke. It was people like Jack. Jack loved meetings. He loved saying, "I've been thinking." He loved standing in front of the big screen, walking through the deck like it was his TED Talk. The last big pitch they'd worked on was a perfect example. Daniel had spent 3 nights cleaning messy data, building dashboards, finding that one insight that would actually move the client's revenue needle. Jack walked in, hit present, and said, "So, here's the idea I've been working on." The client loved it. The VP shook Jack's hand in front of everyone. After the meeting, Jack clapped Daniel on the shoulder and said, "Couldn't have done it without you, man." Daniel smiled. He always smiled. Inside, something burned, but he pushed it down. As long as the project works, he told himself, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. He'd been repeating that sentence for years. One gray Monday morning, an all-hands meeting appeared on everyone's calendar. People in open-plan offices know what that usually means. Restructuring. The CEO talked about market headwinds and strategic priorities. Then the HR director stepped up with a list. Key people we absolutely need to retain. Jack's name was on it. Daniel's wasn't. He stared at the screen, at the list that supposedly represented the people we can't afford to lose. It wasn't just that his name wasn't there. It was the realization behind it. In the rooms where decisions were made, they didn't even know what he did. He was a ghost, holding the company together at 11 p.m. and a shadow at 11 a.m. when it counted. A week later, during a follow-up call with a major client, someone from the client's side asked a simple question. By the way, who was the analyst behind that dashboard from last quarter? It practically saved our campaign. Jack leaned toward the camera and said, "We have a great team here. Everyone contributed." Everyone. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He could have unmuted, could have said one sentence. "It was me." But his finger hovered over the mouse and never clicked. When the call ended, everyone logged off one by one. Daniel sat there, staring at his own reflection on the black laptop screen. He opened the folder where he kept his work. Report after report, model after model, all created by him. None of them carrying his name anywhere public. His silence had become a habit so deep that he had quietly erased himself from his own story. For the first time, it didn't feel like humility. It felt like betrayal of himself. If you've ever watched someone louder take credit for the work you carried in the dark, you're not alone. Stories like Daniel's are what we share here, not to turn you bitter, but to help you see clearly where you've been disappearing. If this already feels a little too familiar, you might want to stick around this channel for a while. Daniel didn't wake up the next day and suddenly become the most talkative person in the office. He didn't start interrupting people or posting inspirational quotes on LinkedIn. Instead, He made one quiet decision. I will stop letting my silence hide my work. He started with something small. After every big project, he wrote a short summary email to the team and his manager. No bragging. No, look at me. Just, here's what we changed. Here's what we learned. Here's the impact. He signed his name at the bottom. In meetings, he didn't try to compete with Jack's energy. He prepared 1 or 2 sentences in advance. A key number, a risk nobody had mentioned, an outcome from the last test. And when the moment came, he forced himself to unmute and say it, even when his heart beat too fast. At first, nobody reacted. Old habits are strong, especially in offices. But then came another client review. They asked a complicated question about why a certain campaign suddenly improved in week 3. Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't actually know. Daniel did. He leaned forward and said, "If you check slide 12, you'll see we changed the audience targeting based on what we saw in your retention data. That's why your cost per acquisition dropped in week 3. The room went quiet for a second. Then the client nodded. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. The VP turned to Daniel. I didn't realize you were behind that adjustment. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a standing ovation. But it was the first time someone in power connected Daniel's name to the value he had been quietly creating for years. Daniel never became the loudest voice in the company. He still preferred headphones to small talk. He still stayed late sometimes, fixing things nobody else wanted to touch. But his silence stopped being a hiding place. It became a choice. He still moved in the dark, still did the work others ignored. He just stopped allowing that work to be invisible. Maybe you don't need to become louder either. Maybe you just need to stop apologizing for the things you've already built in the quiet. If you saw a bit of yourself in Daniel today, tell me one thing you've done in silence that nobody really knows about. You don't have to share every detail, just enough so that, at least here, your quiet work finally has a name.